you are now looking towards building like this solid unit. But during the VCT qualifier, you also try to sort of improvise last moment, right? You had the late substitution of DavidP into the roster. Of course, now that doesn't presumably break the French-speaking narrative, right? Because as far as I know, he's from Belgium, so he probably speaks fluent French there, or at least good enough. So what was the decision there going into that?
Great follow-up question, Iska. On that end, definitely there was a visible pattern on the qualifiers, and I saw a couple of people pointing it out, which I thank them. I didn't really capture it at first, so I thank them for the info. The thing is having to be addressed that those qualifiers and those formats, they are very tough. Like, you have to win.
Right.
And I think a lot of teams, even if they maybe don't speak about it, we can all agree that those qualifiers were extremely important, because that's one of maybe your only chance where you have a very high percentages of qualifying to the VCT, the challengers, maybe league is not the right word, let's say tournament, whatever it is. So when we did the first qualifier, the team was like 3 or 4 weeks old, and we had lapsus. We had daemoN in the roster, where he was a good fit, definitely a good fit, doing very well on many instances. There's just a couple of issues that sometimes happens, and they're not like making him a bad player. People would look into the VLR.gg and see that he was up fragging, he was present. I know that a lot of people in the public opinion has like a good eye on daemoN, and he does deserve it. It's just in a configuration of, like, again, this team, those 5 fingers of one hand, like sometimes things does not work. And I think there was a couple of issues with daemoN that we wanted to work on, but simply didn't work. And that's the nature of the sport. That's the nature of Valorant. And that, again, I repeat, doesn't make him a bad player. But we had to take a decision and try to make it work. And daemoN is pretty young. He has a lot as well to learn and a lot to eat. And this experience is extremely valuable. But because of the nature of the competition, second qualifier was our last shot at it. And who is better at handling pressure and like a difficult mission and be able to handle it than DavidP? And that's where he came into my mind, and I offered him the possibility to play with us and the second qualifier and try to make things work potentially, which it was done to. Sadly, we had only 3 days, which with maybe 1 or 2 more days, I feel like would have made actually the difference. But we were still meet with again a lot of experience gathered together, and he managed to bring a lot of good things into the team, a lot of theory thinking, etc. And honestly, considering the amount of time and what we tried to put in terms of work, I was I'm happy with the result. It was very close against Young, who are considered a good team, which themselves did very good against the new iteration of the G2 roster. So at the end of the day, and that's the nature of the game, it could have gone both ways, So honestly, I think DavidP bring the experience and the talent that I know he had, and I wanted to experiment with this team, especially last minute. And I think we did what we could, more or less, in the current configuration. No, it didn't work, of course, as many things can work, some doesn't. But we really tried there, and he did really try as well himself. So I just want to thank him for the things that he bring, and what as well for the rest of the players in the amount of work that we tried to put and so on.
Right. Now, given the nature of how Valorant currently operates, or how the schedule for VCT shakes out, it's both a bless and a curse, it seems like, because on one hand, there's no VCT for you guys for a minute. On the other hand, you also have some time to prepare now. So what is your mindset going forward? What time is it for OG in your mind?
Well, some time to prepare would be an interesting take, because technically the new, I mean, as you know, we are invited to the French League.
Right.
The French League starts the 13th or 15th of February, one of those 2 dates. And then it's like until the 10th or 13th of March, which means that if you count the amount of teams and the fact that at this specific moment, this is the only moment where you can qualify to challengers, that means that you have to win technically every single match.
Right.
With no return, like sometimes you do one match with the specific team and then another match with the same team, and then it doesn't really happen. So I would say at least we definitely have, we technically have the same amount of time than VCT, actually a little bit less, but at least we have the core of players. Now it's mostly a question of what we do and how we can execute it in a productive and efficient manner.
Right. Do you feel like you have a solid idea at this point?
I would say that we have definitely directions. Mm-hmm. Now it's mostly a question of where can we go with it, and definitely which direction to take is already good. I think maybe I sound a little bit pessimistic, but actually I'm not at all. It's all the time very rushy and difficult to maneuver, and at the end of the day, we're just trying to find the good answers. I think right now we have what it takes to get in and to be successful. Mostly a matter of managing those casualties that sometimes can happen because, again, of the nature of the sport. That's how I see it. So it's a bit early to say for anything and to answer that question specifically, but that's how I would answer it right now.
For sure. How do you think generally of this current format of VCT? Do you think it offers enough chances to fail and reiterate on the process? Because initially it certainly drew some criticism, right?
Yeah, it's debatable. It's always gonna be debatable. What is sure is that I came terms for that element since a while, especially on my Overwatch days. I'm never gonna speak out of my ass when I don't know about something. I'm not gonna talk. I'm sure Riot are doing their best to make their game successful. Either it impacts us or not, doesn't really matter. They need to make themselves successful, as everybody needs to make themselves successful. The only thing for sure is that I'm a little bit apprehensive of the idea that the most important moment of the year is happening the 10th of January.
Right.
And of course, the off-season was long, but the game is new and there's a lot of things changing, Even last year, we were met with 3 to 4 different format change. They are learning. They are learning and they want to adapt as much as the teams needs to learn and adapt, So I would say it's pretty weird to me that you have to be good right off the bat. And then, yes, you have 2 relegated teams, but then that doesn't really, that kind of helps to shake the level up, because again, I'm kind of weirded out by the fact that because you start so early in the year, you're gonna end up with teams who are not to the same level by mid or end of the year. So technically it should be the way up, you kind of like it was last year, where you try to walk your way up, and then potentially teams becomes better. Because that's another thing about Valorant, is that we were met with 6 to 7 different champions throughout the year. Correct?
Right.
So Sentinels, Gambit, I mean, we had G2, Heretic, Sentinels, Gambit, Ascent. You know, it's a lot of changes throughout the year, and it can be linked to the format, can be linked to the game design, can be linked to many other things. But at the end of the day, it's mostly a question of adapting. Fnatic technically were up there as well in Europe. Then they had to give their place to other teams. No, it's a very weird pace. Like everyone is still learning about what they're doing, and I think we think that we know what we're doing, but maybe we're not. And Riot is in the same place as us. Maybe there's a lot of things that they know that they're doing, but they're not. And it's not a criticism, of course. It's just the nature of everything. You know, when you create something new, you have to adapt to that environment and you get to know more and more and more. Like certain characters in the game, Overwatch, it was the same case. Like some characters were like, oh, this thing is bad. You know, this character's never gonna meet success. And then the character is played every single game. You know, it's just a question of time. Time to adapting to new things. And then, but when it comes to Valorant and its esport and its game, like it takes a long time. You know, it doesn't take only a couple of months or years. So right now, it's just, I hope for the best that we can win for the VLR France. If we don't win, then I have to prepare for next year. That's how I see it. But that's kind of unfortunate because I feel like maybe with a little bit more time, let's say that we're not winning in March, I think we could win later in the year, and be relevant. So that's all. And maybe some other teams who are even more deserving than us, let's say, could be in the same sentiment, and they could even do better than us. So that's unfortunate for those teams. It's unfortunate for us. It's unfortunate for everyone.
Isn't also part of the problem that VCT seems to be valued so highly by everyone? Because it seems like if you're not in VCT and like competing there, in other scenes like CS where they run a sort of similar tournament or a year-round cycle, they at least have the IEMs, and like the IEMs now have created their own draw by having, like the Grand Slam or whatnot. That almost feels like a second theoretical major or like a trophy that could way up to the major in terms of that. Do you think that's something that if you want to have an open system, it can't just be VCT, it also someone needs to step up and create like a tournament that can rival VCT?
Honestly, I have a couple of ideas, and I know it's gonna be party pooper a little bit, but again, when I don't know what I'm working on, I usually don't speak up.
Right.
So when it comes to tournament system and like an actual good format, I think what I'm very confident about is that we can never be happy. There's no perfect system. There's always going to be people left out and some people who are getting advantages when it shouldn't. What I know for sure is that Riot definitely puts the player first right in the front gate on the golden plate. And they're like, we're giving the chance to everyone at any point. Of course, they have to do this, and then the other part is like, we are Riot, we need to be successful, we need to believe in our own theory and on like stuff that we want to do. So, of course, myself, and I'm sure a lot of people are not happy with certain things, but what at least I am grateful about, especially coming from Overwatch, is that at least they are trying. And I like people who are trying. Yeah. You need to try. Yeah. You need to put effort into something. And what they're trying to do is like, I feel to a certain extent is trying to lift mountains. And I think sometimes it's not necessary, but at least they're doing it, and they're trying to own it. So there's part where I am sad and maybe sometimes angry about, but there's another part of me that is grateful for what they're doing. So I think at the end of the day, it's like the pros and the cons. And of course, at the end of the day, it makes you maybe lame or like it makes you without an opinion. But I know that it's so bad to be aggressive on people who are actually trying to do stuff. So why the matter? Why put the negativity at the front gate where it's not necessary? So I'm gonna play along. At least what is sure in any format that they do is that you're good, you'll get your goods. You're bad, you get out. As simple as that. Now, sometimes it's a little bit sad because some moments you're bad, some moments you're not. And again, to put the retrospective again of last year is that you have 5 to 6 different champions. Does that mean that they're bad or they are not good? No, it's just the game is shaping, it's flourishing. It's a little butterfly, it's getting out of the cocoons and then it's trying out. So I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
If you were to, let's say, someone asks you, so how much more tournament games can we feasibly allow before we get to oversaturation and burnout? Are we close to that, or are we still pretty safe?
Burnout.
Yeah.
We played maybe 5, 6 officials in last year. No, that's definitely not enough. The issue as well is that the game is definitely hard and it asks a lot of work. So you could be easily close to burnout. But when it comes to official and the current system is that there's never enough. Kind of like the same situations that we had in VCT where there were so many teams that there were people in the waiting list, including us. The thing is, and it's kind of what made me laugh as well in this situation is that last year people were like, we don't want BO1s. And I said, okay, no problem. Then next year, people are on the waiting list. We want 512 people. We want 512 teams. And then they're like, no, no BO1s. Yeah. So, of course, it's again the same thing where sometimes you can be angry, but sometimes you should definitely not talk and be grateful for what you have. I think there's definitely a lot of more fluctuation, like a lot of teams, a lot of interest on the competitive side. And I think it's been more or less showcased that, of course, last year, for instance, we had 7, 8, 9, 10 matches. And technically last year was like the qualifier to qualify to the qualifier, to qualify to So it was complicated. But the issue is that the best format technically is to give as much chances as possible. Because not only you give chances to everyone when, for instance, in a tournament you don't perform. Let's say VCT you don't perform. Let's say you had a bad moment. I will take the example of Vitality. Vitality, in my opinion, should have been in VCT EMEA. They should have been in Challengers. It didn't happen. I'm not going to talk out of my ass again, but that's definitely not the target was. And I'm sure they are definitely not happy about it for many reasons. So,
right.
If, for instance, Vitality has such a good tournament on the moment, but then they lose the fuel towards the end, then what do? They go into VLR France and they have to, and then they have to go to relegation in 7. So at the end of the day, what would be good is that this amount of matches that you have by qualifier, I think is good. The fact that we don't have BO1s, the fact that it's not to strain, you have 1-2 match at most per day. And the way that they do it, less qualifiers to the qualifiers again, but more chances, like a tournament every, 2 months. Every tournament every 2 months, 1 month and a half, and you give your chances. But again, I'm not a tournament format creator. I'm not too knowledgeable about the matter, but it's just a question of chances. And again, for instance, Vitality, I have no ties to them. I don't really care about them, but I would be in their shoes. I would be sad. You lose against the 2 teams who outperformed the first qualifier. Like the 2 teams who qualified big and don't remember the other one. But like they lost against them, which means that they should have qualified to the second one, but they didn't. And you can clearly see that they missed the mark, because the competition itself and the format is so tough in the first place. So, it's... But again, that's an opinion. I know people is going to say, no, that's not true, blah, blah. Yeah, each one's his opinion, but at least that's how I feel, for sure.
For sure. Then we wish you the best in, I guess, the next 2 weeks, the best of preparation, and good luck in your qualification matches, and thank you for the interview.
Yeah, thank you so much, Iska. Always a pleasure.